Rudy's Revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. It is April 4th, Friday. Happy Friday. We have a lot to discuss today. The trade war with the Chinese communists has begun. And as I mentioned yesterday, that's the whole point of this exercise, is to cut the umbilical cord of U.S. corporations tied to the communists in Asia. And then we got other good news and some strange news coming up right now. Stick with me. We're starting out with good news from the Wall Street Journal. Hiring defied expectations in March with 228,000 new jobs. Healthcare, social assistance, and the transportation sector added jobs. If you don't know what good news this is, it is extremely good news. Because first of all, the Biden administration, when they added jobs, they always skewed the numbers, so they're never correct. And the job growth under Biden was very tepid. This is actually the first real jobs report since Trump was sworn in. February really doesn't count because he really wasn't in office in January. So this is the first real jobs report, and it's spectacular. Let's go on over to another headline here from CNBC. U.S. payrolls rose by 228,000 in March, but unemployment rate increases to 4.2. Well, let me get into that very briefly. First of all, high unemployment isn't good. And if it's over 4, it isn't really good. But unemployment is also a good indicator of inflation. Higher unemployment means lower inflation. I'm not going to get into why that occurs, but that actually, the unemployment rate going up is significant. Because it means not only are there more people seeking jobs, which is a good sign, but also it means that inflation, core inflation, is going down. You have to excuse my late start this morning. My wife is getting up super early for a special project, and she wakes me up, and I fall back to sleep, and I can't really get things going in time. So thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. All right, let's move on with the New York Times. Live updates on an ongoing story here. U.S. job growth strong amid trade war worries. They don't worry me so much. They should worry the other countries, and they do. And also corporations. Employers added 228,000 jobs, as we stated in March. Many more than expected, even the New York Times says. The subhead continues to say the closely watched report provided some good news as markets reeled from worries about escalating tensions over tariffs. Now, as I mentioned previously, it's a bit of a mask for the broad-based tariffs because the actual target of the tariffs is China. China is an adversary, and why we have most of our manufacturing in China boggles the mind. But most corporations have no allegiance to any nation state. That's why they are multinational and actually supranational. So they don't care. The reason they made millions of dollars using the communist slave labor, and that's why they liked moving manufacturing, hollowing out the middle America jobs, so forth and so on. There's going to be some reeling because of this, but let's get into the story with some more headlines from the New York Post. China retaliates against Trump with 34% tariff on U.S. imports. And then the New York Times, again, stock rout intensifies as China retaliates for Trump tariffs. Markets reeled from worries about the trade war. It is a trade war, and if I said it once, I'm going to say it again, that the Chinese have been at war with us for many, many years, probably since the 50s. And even though we played nice with them over trade, with certain ideas to use China as we use the Soviet Union for manufacturing, because you have a dictatorship, you have basically slave labor. They have still been in a fifth generational war with us, espionage. We obviously know what happened with COVID and various other factors, especially dealing with trade, currency manipulation, intellectual property theft, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So they use all the money that they make from our industry, from partnering up with corporations to bolster their military, and now threaten us around the world. President Trump insisted that his policies were working, and they will work. But there's going to be some pain after this umbilical cord is cut, because there's going to have to be some restructuring. It's going to cost corporations money. There's going to be a downslide depending where you're invested. If you're invested in international manufacturing, you should have pulled out by now. The thing is, with Trump, people didn't believe that he wasn't going to blink. And he blinked. And he didn't blink, I should say, is that he's going to carry through with the tariffs no matter what. And it's illustrated in this Wall Street Journal headline, "Resistance is futile, make a deal, Trump's tariff message to the world." The administration is trying to head off painful retaliatory measures, forcing big trading partners to decide whether fighting is worth it. So there is no way that communist China will open their market, because they've always had a belligerent stance toward the United States. There's no way they're going to open their markets to the United States goods. They never have. And so it's really been unfair that we use China so much, and the state of their ideology and their political structure, that we use them, and then they have this adversarial relationship with us. So we shouldn't use them. Certainly, we shouldn't be pumping money into countries that are ideologically opposed to us. Maybe not to Bernie Sanders, but to most of us living in the United States. I just have to fix something here. Excuse me. A little bit of a mistake. Ordering. All right, more news. One American News: Ford slashes prices as Volvo Mercedes consider expanding U.S. production amid Trump's auto tariffs. So this is good news. So if you're considering buying a Ford, my wife said, "I'm getting Ford next." I'm like, okay. So they're offering regular customers employing discount as to boost prices. Just if you don't know what this means, if you've never been involved in protectionism, isolationist periods, that you want to shift your preferences to American made. Most patriots have been doing this anyway. I think folks should do this now, especially during this brief period. If you're used to eating Jarlsberg Swiss cheese, you might want to shift to an American-made brand. Or if you like, shopping for cheap clothes at Walmart, for the time being, you might want to go somewhere else. It's hard to say. I try not to buy anything from China, so I don't think this is going to affect me. I avoid Walmart specifically because of their labor practices, so forth and so on. So you're going to have to get a little more serious. All right, Real Clear Politics. Robert Lighthizer Trump is right to fix our broken trade system. The former U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer explains why something needs to change in U.S. trade policy. And he recently was on Tucker Carlson. Market Watch, a trade shock sparked the biggest stock market plunge since 2020. What investors need to know. And don't forget, the 2020 stock market plunge was because of COVID, thanks to China and the deep state, the establishment. Investors were hoping for clarity on April 2nd. Instead, they now face more uncertainty over retaliatory tariffs, economic growth, and inflation. Hey, smart people, you whizzes on Wall Street. Trump is hawkish on China. And there's a bunch of different reasons for that. And if you haven't been, if you think you're golden goose there in China, actually you're red and gold goose in China, you should understand is that no mas. All right, we can't have all our antibiotics made in China. What if we are at war with China? What if there's another global pandemic and supply chains get shut down? Whatever. We need to bring some essential manufacturing back here. The only way to do it, and by the way, Trump made it clear in his first term, and he's made it clear on the campaign trail, is that no mas. This isn't going to work, so you had plenty of time to extract yourself from the Chinese manufacturing conundrum. Along these lines, you can see One American News is reporting U.S. government personnel in China banned from engaging in romantic or sexual relationships with Chinese, national Chinese. And he should really, this is kind of an old story, and I'm going to get to it in just a second, because it happened really back in January, right before Trump was inaugurated. But it really should apply to government officials in the United States as well. Is that you shouldn't be allowed to have relationships with Chinese nationals who are required to spy for the communist Chinese. Let's get to the story. The United States government has prohibited all romantic and sexual relationships between U.S. government employees or affiliated personnel and Chinese citizens while stationed or present in China. Policy, which took effect in January, bars all U.S. diplomatic staff, contractors, and family members with security clearances stationed in mainland China and Hong Kong, according to the Associated Press. The ban was put in place by U.S. Ambassador Nicholas Burns just days prior to President Donald Trump's being sworn in, and it was in addition to a more limited policy banning U.S. personnel from romantic and sexual relationships with Chinese citizens operating at the U.S. Embassy, as well as 5 consulates in China. It should really have to do with all government officials, even in the United States. All right, moving on to this next story. NSA chief fired after activist Laura Loomer urged Trump to remove him. Hold on one second, please. Sorry about that, folks. So this PJ Media article, NSA chief fired after activist Laura Loomer urged to remove him. And then Mediaite has the full story. Trump purges national security team after Laura Loomer calls for heads to roll in Oval Office meeting. Mediaite goes on to say far-right activist Laura Loomer called for heads to roll in an Oval Office meeting with President Donald Trump on Wednesday, and Trump took her advice the very next morning. Oliver Darcy of CNN delivered the initial scoop about the meeting. The New York Times shed further light. Ms. Loomer walked into the White House with receipts and amounted to a mass opposition research attacking the character and loyalty of numerous NSC officials. Well, let me just stop right there and say, look, we just had this dust up over Signal Perry was, when I was on with Perry the other night, he speculated about who was responsible. And I even said the NSC, or the National Security Council, is replete with neocons and other, as Perry said, stay-behinds. So it's not Michael Walsh per se, but maybe some of his aides, some stayovers from the National Security Council. And then moving on to the next story here, New York Post, NSA Director and Cyber Command Chief Timothy Haw, Deputy Wendy Noble fired in major shakeup at wiretapping agency. Director of the National Security Agency, Air Force General Timothy Haw, reportedly was fired Thursday from his post as head of the agency. He was moved to another post within the NSA. Haw's removal as director of the NSA, the national's primary cyber espionage and electronic eavesdropping agency, comes on the same day. At least 3 White House National Security Council staffers reportedly were also shown the door. The ousted NSA Director Civilian Deputy Wendy Noble was also let go on Thursday, according to the Washington Post, citing the former U.S. officials. Well, we know it's because of what Laura Loomer said. Now, I don't really, I don't care much for Laura Loomer. I don't care either way. I'm indifferent. I think she's Israeli intelligence. That's just my thing. And I'm not one of these guys. It's all about Israel and Jew and what have you. And I also was kind of concerned about her gender. I've never met her. People said, oh, if you met her, you'd know that she's a real woman. And I appreciate her gumption. So I'm not necessarily worried about this too much. If she came with receipts and Trump acted on it as Trump would do, good. I'm all for that. So moving on with some of the stories here. I don't want to take too long because I started late, so I'm going to try to rush through these. One American News is reporting Trump gains unlikely Democrat support for tariffs. This is a good start. Representative Jared Golden, Democrat of Maine, pointed out in a lengthy statement that he had proposed a 10% blanket tariff on U.S. imports earlier this year and noted that he was happy that Trump's baseline policy was the same. Very good. I wish fucking Susan Collins would get on the bandwagon. I mean, we can't count on Mitch McConnell or Murkowski. And Murkowski owes her seat right now to McConnell. So she'll do whatever McConnell does. Because if it wasn't for Mitch McConnell, Chewbacca would be there and have that Senate seat. And Chewbacca was a MAGA Republican, so she's a conservative. But McConnell was trying to shore up his establishment base because MAGA had taken over the House and they were surely going to take over the Senate, which they did. And now the people that were establishment are moving over to the populist column. All right, yesterday I reported on the Nashville school shooter. And I'm going to get into that briefly only because the Federalist editor had an editorial, or I don't think it was the Federalist editor. It was another editor, I think from the Tennessee Star. So let's get into that story. Nashville police report on trans killer conceals full motive, as I said yesterday. The long-awaited Metropolitan Nashville Police Department report on the twisted trans killer who stormed into a Nashville Christian elementary school and killed 3 children and 3 adults is nothing more than a whitewash of the facts, according to Michael Patrick Leahy, CEO and editor-in-chief of the Tennessee Star. I think the purpose of the report and the way it was written was to conceal the motive. Let that sink in. Conceal the motive was not indeed notoriety, but the hatred of Christian schools and the hatred of those who did not accept her identity as transgender, Leahy told the Federalist Tuesday in a phone interview. Leahy Star News Digital Media is one of the several organizations that had sued the MNPD to release Hale's manifesto. a voluminous collection of journals and other writings. Leahy and I, the author of this article, are plaintiffs in the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the Department of Justice demanding the FBI make public Hale's documents. Both agencies have speciously insisted they could not turn over the records until the investigation was closed. Part and parcel is it is a whitewash protecting not only the pharmaceutical industry, but the and I went over this yesterday, that Audrey Hale went through this intense psychological review treatment for 8 weeks, and then she seemed to be worse off than she was before. How does that happen? So none of that, and not only that, but so what happened during that intervention? Hard to say. She became even more militant, apparently, about her transgenderism. A little bit more from this story. While there's no truth in the conclusion, Leahy said the official account is missing some of the key facts, not least of which was the word transgender. MNPD, however, notes that the killer was gender identified. So in other words, he's saying that the word transgender didn't appear in the report, and that she preferred to use he and him as preferred pronouns prior to her death. Dozens of pages of documents, Hale's journal entries in the weeks before the attack, seem to paint a picture of a disturbed mind bent on trans ideology. And if you look at some of this here, some of the further quotes from the text, or from her manifesto: I am of no society. I hate society. Society ignores to see me. I am queer. I am meant to die. She also wrote about her imaginary penis and that she would kill to get her hands on puberty blockers less than 2 weeks before her attack. And then she goes on to write, my penis exists in my head. I swear to God, I am male. That is gender dysphoria, without a doubt. So my penis exists in my head too, but it also exists on my body. I don't have an imaginary penis. I have a real penis. And if you have an imaginary penis in your head, this is what I'm talking about, is there's a difference between saying I'm a man but I want to become a woman, or I am a woman in my mind and so I am a woman. That's gender dysphoria. It's mental illness. All right, more news. Concerned parents of trans kids compared to hate groups by Colorado Dem wouldn't ask the KKK for an opinion. Democrat says bill does not need to be discussed with hate groups. So if you're a parent concerned with the mental illness of children, including gender dysphoria, then you're a hate group. And so they also, I'm not going to get too much into the story. Well, let's just go to this next article because it revolves around the same story. And this is from Zero Hedge. Democrats want misgendering and dead naming to be considered child abuse. Democrats in Colorado have introduced legislation that would recognize misgendering and dead naming as forms of abuse of children who have decided to identify as transgender. And this is, if you look at the legislation closely, this is specifically has to do with child custody cases. So if you're a parent who doesn't recognize or doesn't play into your child's mental illness or gender dysphoria by using their new name or their new pronouns, that's considered child abuse. This is very much echoes the cyber crimes in Europe, that if you refer to people with the wrong pronouns or dead name them over the internet, that's a crime in some European countries. More news. Democrats are terrified of Trump's plan to make elections secure. This is from the Federalist. And this has to do, I believe, with the SAVE Act. I'll just read from the story here. Trump and congressional Republicans are escalating their assault on American democracy through the noxious SAVE Act, Senate Minority Chuck Schumer said. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said, congressional Republicans are pushing a proposal that would coerce states into instituting policies that would effectively prevent millions of American citizens from voting. I don't think so, Chuck. First of all, for you to live your life, basically, in the United States, you need photo ID to open a bank account, to do really just about anything. How does Chuck Schumer know these millions of people are American citizens? He's just taking their word for it. The truth is, Schumer doesn't have proof, and neither does anyone else. It's hyperbole. Taking someone's word for their citizen status isn't confirmation. And it's the same thing when you register to vote. The voting officials, the election officials there, will ask you if you're a citizen, but they don't demand proof. Our election should never hinge on the honor system when there's so much at stake. That's why Republicans introduced the Safeguarding American Voter Eligibility Act. I'm a proponent of the SAVE Act. I'm not really a proponent of Real ID. That's a completely different thing, and that has to do with employment. I don't think those two things should mix, because then you're basically saying that you need to have papers, that you need to have ID to do anything, with a registration number and all these things. I just believe that a photo ID issued by a state or federal, a passport, should be needed to register to vote. And I think those documents should be okay to be hired for work as well. I don't believe in Real ID. That's a federal registration of driver's license. That's something I don't agree in. All right, up next, the post-millennial red flag. Carney calls to freeze Freedom Truckers' bank accounts, said protesters was seditious. So Mark Carney is the new Prime Minister of Canada. And as we warned before, we know Chrystia Freeland was indeed a WEF acolyte and that she was a globalist. And people weren't sure about Mark Carney, but he's a globalist as well. So he described balloon bouncy cancels as a grassroots peaceful movement, as dangerous infrastructure that was being reinforced by those funding the movement. And this goes back to the trucker protests during COVID, where all the authoritarian behavior surrounding COVID was illegitimate. They exaggerated the threat from COVID. COVID was done on purpose to steal the election from Donald Trump, among other things. Also, it allowed China to roll into Hong Kong. So people have to understand what COVID was really about. Was it an accidental release from the lab? Was it purposeful? Hard to say. You could easily have a purposeful release right around a lab where they're testing COVID. And so how are you going to know? Don't forget that the U.S. military was in Wuhan several weeks before the outbreak. Zero Hedges reporting South Korea's top court ousts impeached President Yoon over martial law declaration. If you didn't know what was going on here, South Korea's constitutional court on Friday finalized the ouster of President Yoon Suk Yeol, putting its stamp of approval on his impeachment. And he was impeached because he declared martial law, because he said the communists are taking over the country. And by communists, he didn't mean the North Koreans. He said North Korean sympathizers. He didn't say North Koreans. He said socialists within South Korea. And we know all about that. More from the post-millennial. And so there were a couple episodes recently with leftist attacks, violent attacks. This is from the post-millennial. Antifa attacks Turning Point USA tabling event featuring Brandon Tatum at University of California, Davis. Gear stolen and students assaulted. According to organizers, they stole the canopy, ripped down banners, smashed foam boards, and even tried to steal an iPad and laptop from TPUSA students. The group also said TPUSA students were shoved and had objects thrown at them while police did nothing. That's assault. Only after the damage was done did law enforcement finally form a perimeter. This is the reality of free speech on campus. So what they're talking about here, and this has been seen over and over and over again, is the police stand back. And this, I talked about this yesterday. I don't believe in proactive policing. I said police presence can be a deterrent, but I don't think police should do stuff before crimes are committed. But when a crime is being committed and you witness it, that's the time to step in and beat those motherfuckers. So that's my problem, is they allowed crime, they were present and allowed crimes to take place while they witnessed them, and then after they did nothing. Apparently nobody was arrested. Even after people were attacked, vandalism occurred, and the police did nothing. And that's more troubling than fucking Antifa, which are the new neo-brown shirts of the Democratic Party. Postmillennial reports on another attack. Pro-life activist Savannah Craven beaten and bloodied by abortion supporter during New York City street interview. At first, the woman engaged in conversation, but after realizing Craven was pro-life, she became angry and started punching her in the face, leaving her bloody. There are a lot of people, especially people of color, who believe you're justified in assaulting people if they talk to you and you don't like what they say. When I was working in journalism, I had a minority woman say to me that if she didn't want me to take her picture in public and I took her picture, she would beat me or get someone to beat me up and take my camera. What the fuck is wrong with people? You have rights, and you have rights to talk to people. That doesn't mean you can be assaulted. And so they're looking for this person. Anyway, the story goes on to say that Savannah Craven looked around with the with the New York City Police Department. Abortion supporters are violent, she said. She said she was assaulted in Harlem, interviewing people on the street, and now she's in a cop car heading to the hospital and looking for the assailant. More news from the Washington Examiner, the Biden dam breaks. So if you don't know what's happening here, is that not only are the rats fleeing a sinking ship from the Democratic Party, which has been happening over a decade now, is that there have been a couple tell-all, I think 3 tell-all books about how nobody spoke out about Biden's mental status, which he wasn't cogent most of his term. And that the Democrats don't care, they're in power. And so it looks like Ron Klain was running the show until he left, and he didn't want to be seen holding the bag. So who knows who was running the show after that? Kamala? Jill Biden, maybe? Unprecedented that someone of that physical incompetence or mental incompetence would be the chief of executive, the executive of the country, just of the most powerful country in the world. Unbelievable. All right, more news. One American News, Epstein victim Virginia Giuffre accused of lying about details of bus collision, breaching family violence restraining order. Story goes on to say, I was clued in on this in the beginning. It didn't make sense because I verify everything. So when I went to look for the accident reporting, there was some, but it said it was a minor accident. It showed a picture of the bus and it was sideswiped. And then the picture in her Instagram looked funny. And anyway, let's go to the story here. Meanwhile, following the recent troubling social media post, the Perth-based mother of 3 now claims that she made a mistake by sharing the post of her wounds publicly, and she had allegedly believed that she was posting on a private Instagram Meta account, according to the statement later issued on Giuffre's behalf. According to her initial story, after a bus driver struck a car that she was in going 68 miles per hour, according to her, Giuffre declared that she had only 4 days to live, as medical professionals informed her that she had gone into kidney renal failure. But the truth of the matter is that the accident had no reported injuries. The collision was reported by the bus driver the following day. The car sustained approximately $2,000 worth of damage. There were no reported injuries as a result of the crash. The bus driver, Ross Munns, she had blown it out of proportion. Munns, who had been driving the school bus for 16 years, told the Daily Mail that the accident occurred when he chose to safely pass a 71-year-old woman driving a slow-moving white Toyota Highlander at less than 46 miles per hour. Munns, who was driving 29 kids at the time of the incident, claimed that he had started to pass the car and abruptly turned directly in front of him at the last second. So it was a contrived accident. He was unable to prevent clipping the vehicle, damaging its taillight, and what he called a minor collision. There you go. I reported on this recently as the New York Times invasion of the home humanoid robots. The New York Times is reporting what we already know, and what Lutnick recently admitted to is that the humanoid robots are already being produced. And within the next year or two, they're going to start being introduced. What their proficiency is going to be has yet to be seen. But apparently, this disruptive technology is being held back severely until its initial debut. Something out of iRobot is they're just going to release these things onto the public. And, you could call me Detective Spooner, and I will say, I told you so at some point. Axios is reporting what to know about Saturday's nationwide hands-off anti-Trump protests. So there are more protests. This is not just corruption. This is not just mismanagement. This is a hostile takeover, they say. More than 1,100 rallies, visibility events. You know what that means. And meetings were scheduled in all 50 states Wednesday afternoon. 500,000 RSVPs, and so they're going to cause a lot of trouble on Saturday. And related stories. I just wanted to show you quickly this one picture of this one single guy not looking too happy. Hands off my benefits, VA, Social Security, and Medicare. Nobody's touching that. Dummy. Hold on one second. What the hell's going on? Oh, this is from the same story. I'm sorry, I made a little mistake here. This is from the same Axios article. It just one was from Microsoft, and this is the other one. Protests force rescheduling of Saturday White House tours. The White House Spring Garden tour scheduled Saturday were postponed in anticipation for large-scale anti-President Trump protests. First Lady Melania Trump said Thursday the mass movement is catching the eye of the Trump administration before demonstrators even take to the streets. They're wary of leftists being able to cause a lot of trouble, depending how far left or progressive they are. Now we'll go to this New York Times article. EU preparing major penalties against Elon Musk's X. It doesn't surprise me. You saw protests there over the last weekend where people in Europe were vandalizing. This is the thing. They were vandalizing Tesla dealerships to bring awareness to climate change. So Elon Musk's Tesla makes electric cars, which are supposed to be beneficial to help reduce climate change. So some of these leftist protesters don't even make any sense. So in any case, the story goes on in the New York Times to say in the subhead that European regulators are considering fining X more than $1 billion after weighing the risks of further antagonizing Mr. Musk and Mr. Trump. What is this about? This is about misinformation, allowing misinformation on the platform. So one person's misinformation is another person's truth. Wouldn't you say? And this brings us to our next story from the BBC. Comedian Russell Brand charged with rape. Russell Brand had been charged with rape and indecent assault and sexual assault between 1999 and 2005. It's 20 years, bro. Give it a rest. 4 separate women who are now ugly after 20 years. They were probably cute back then. But the one that caught my eye, well, he was charged with rape in 1999 by a woman. 2001, a woman was indecently assaulted. And then in 2004, a woman was orally raped. Now, how does that happen? I don't know how that happens. I mean, if the guy is down there, can't you punch him repeatedly in the head? You know, because if you're vaginally, well, you're raped with intercourse, you know, you could be held down. So you physically can do it. How you can physically rape somebody orally, I don't know. It all sounds like it's consensual, and now these women are being paid because now we have Russell Brand in our camp after being a far lefty loony and then kind of riding the fence for a while. Now he's firmly in our camp. And I like Russell Brand. I like his spiritual energy and all this stuff. And you can be for the common man and be a conservative. Because being on the left, and I think he was an agent of the left for a long time, is you're supporting Fabian socialism or a socialist takeover, neo-feudalistic socialism. Goldman Sachs launches Doge Tracker to monitor real-time DC economic impact. That's a good news for investors. At least I think so. How do we do? 45 minutes. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the podcast. Have a great weekend, everyone. Don't forget to stay hip to the trick. You're under attack psychologically and biologically. And if you find yourself mentally weak or ill, you're more likely to be taken advantage of. But be aware. And we're also, a lot of the attack is happening biologically through chemicals in the food and water. So eat clean. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Live stream on Rumble. Sometimes I'm a little bit late, but be patient. If I'm not going to have an episode, I usually announce it ahead of time. Visit my other website, libpop.org. Learn about libertarian populism. And check me out on social media, Twitter, X, Facebook, Get Our Minds, Truth Social, Substack. You can find rebroadcast of the podcast on BitChute, YouTube, and Substack. All right, have a great weekend, everybody. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
I kill you!
I'm an American. I have rights.
The new world, the new world order.
Google me, bitch! Google me!